this idea, yes. This idea that a big composition for the salon is a machine. This idea, it's a kind of metaphor which was used a lot in 19th century art criticism. Where is it coming from? Alors, first, you have to know that the salon was determinant for the career of the artist at that time, because there was no real market. No, I mean, there were some dealers, but nothing comparable with what we have now. So the artists were exhibiting at the salon. That's where they could be recognized and discovered by future buyers or commissioners. And you have to know that this salon, probably you saw some photographs, some documents. There were thousands of paintings and sculptures, and they were exhibited one over the other. So you had to produce something. Huh? Like now, I mean, it's very much the same. You know, all these artists who do things just to be noticeable. You know, just to grasp the attention. You know, so they, you know, like that. So most of the time it's totally uninteresting, of course, because it's made just for that. And it was already like that in 19th century. You see, there is nothing new under the sun. So you had to provoke, in a way. So it's why the scandal was so important. The idea of scandal did always existed, of course, in culture, even in the Greek and Latin time. But when the art was for the public, it became very important, even more important, of course, because you had to shock the audience. You had to attract the audience. So all the artists were producing these machines, what was called machines, to attract the attention. And they were called machines because, for many reasons, but why? One, because of theater. It relates with the machines of theater. Of the stage, of the theatrical stage. And it relates also probably to this idea that these works were mechanized. I mean, they were built, constructed, you know, like machines, you know, with elements everywhere, you know, I mean, in a kind of mechanical complexity. Voilà. I think there were both ideas. Alors, I just want to precise the story of Mantegna, Hamilton, Duchamp, Stiglitz, to give you the detailed elements. So this is the triptych. This is the photograph of Stiglitz as it was published in a magazine, a little magazine. It was the time of what Americans call little magazines, the little magazines. In French we say les revues, but the term revue doesn't really exist in American, so you have to say little magazine. So it was the time of little magazine. Yes, I mean, it would be a long story. Okay, anyway. It was published there, and you see the Buddha of the bathroom. You can read it? Voilà. So it's clear, you have the text, the Buddha of the bathroom, and in front, the image. The image was illustrating the idea of the Buddha of the bathroom. And we know the background of the urinoir. Alors, donc, you have the urinoir. and photographed by Stiglitz. But you have a background, you see, kind of like a tapestry, huh? Like a papier, how do you call it, even in French, comment on dit en français? Papier peint. Yes, wallpaper, voilà. Huh? You could think of a wallpaper, but it's not. It's a painting. And it is this painting. And it's not nothing, this painting, because it's a painting by Marsden Hartley. And Marsden Hartley is a very interesting artist who was close to Stiglitz, who is one of these American painters who were very influenced by Cézanne. He was so much influenced by Cézanne that he went to Aix, where he spent years painting on the spot where Cézanne had worked. And he was also very attracted by mystical, occultist, I mean, no, not mystical, occultist, but mystical, oriental systems of thinking. And he was also gay in a very strong way. He was attracted, for example, by Nazism because of his homosexuality. So a kind of crazy, interesting person. And this painting is especially, as you see, about representation of a military parade and so on, because he was very attracted by the beautiful soldiers on their horses. So there is all this behind, a kind of something very sexualized, something, you know, mental and sexualized. But the same Marsden Hartley did also that, which is a Buddha. So there was, behind the idea of the Buddha du Bain, there was the background used by Stiglitz. So you see, things are very precise. So now, when you go to the other side, James Joyce, so voilà, this is the detail, you see? It's amazing, no? Voilà. And now, Joyce. What you have in the text. So I'll let you read. So this is in the, as you see, in the 6th chapter called Episode, which is a death, and it's a description of burial. And Bloom is thinking about the decomposition of the body, and you have all these mentions of color. You know, it's very interesting because maybe you never thought about composition, decomposition. We use decomposition for the destruction of the dead body of the corpse, and dilution of the corpse, you know, decomposition. Voilà. And this is the part, the section of the chapter before, 5th. He thought about the future of his own body alive in the bath, Turkish bath. And this is the lines Hamilton chose to illustrate. You see? He foresaw his pale body. You have it there. Évidemment, bloom is blooming, of course. Of course. Now, Ulysses, it's absolutely irresistible. It is the most funny text ever written. It is fantastic. It's full of humor. It's absolutely fantastic. Alors, so you get the points. It's not necessary to comment, I think. Okay. So then, next text. The description of the mess. In the same chapter, same episode. It is just before. This is just before the moment when he foresees himself. So, I hope you appreciate the strength of the text. But there is one point which is very interesting, is the idea of corpus, body, corpse. You know how interesting it is to play on several languages with Latin behind. It's a kind of metaphor of my talk about the tableau, because you see, in English you have body, you don't have, and you have corpus, but and corpus is related to corpse. You can have the pun, corpus, corpse. Okay. What you don't have is the pun between core, corpus, and the corps mort. Yes, and dead body. So to get all these meanings together, he needs to go through the corpus and the Latin etymology behind. And of course, he does it so very easily because the mess is in Latin. And the idea there is the idea of the ritual which is behind is the Eucharisty, which, yes, Eucharisty, which is the presence of the body of the Christ during the Mass. And then you understand why, when he foresees, he says, "This is my body." "This is my body" refers to the description of the Mass. So, this is a portrait of Bloom. And by Hamilton, of course, yes. And this is a declaration by Hamilton. The process of studying Joyce diligently was to provide me with not only subject matter, but it also demonstrated a stylistic and technical freedom that might be applied to painting. Joyce, with his mastery of all style and his virtuosity in weaving them into a rich tapestry, was the exemplar that later gave me confidence to try some unlikely associations in paint. Each of the 12, why 12? There are 18, chapters of Ulysses is treated differently. The language, form, and subject modulate to express differing themes and personalities. Alors, vous voyez, ça c'est un point extrêmement intéressant. Que ah yes, it is a very interesting point. What Hamilton found in Ulysses, it's a diversity. The idea that in one book, you have one book made of, he says, 12 chapters. He probably forgot, I don't know why, the 3 first one and the 3 last ones. Well, because there are 12 in the middle, but plus 6 and 6. 3 and 3, excuse me. So, in a way, you have 18 books in one. Because, and especially at a certain moment, I mean, how to put it? The 3 first chapters are dealing with Stefan Dedalus. Stefan Dedalus, it's, let's say, Joyce himself. I mean, it's coming from, I mean, it is just before Ulysses. It is just as it appeared in the fictional autobiography of Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, before. So, this is the first 3 chapters. And then you have 12 chapters where the main character is Bloom. And at the end, they meet. Huh? Stefan and Bloom. And then, at the end, there are 3 more chapters which are a kind of conclusion, and the last one, which is the monologue, the famous monologue of Bloom's wife, Molly. Huh? Well. But what is fantastic in this book is that, especially at a certain moment, every chapter is written in a new style, with a new model and so on, with sometimes several models. And there is even one chapter which is a complete history of British language. It is a visit to, comment on appelle ça, une maternité. No, maternité where children are born. Okay. And, I start to be tired. So there is this idea of the child coming, but this idea of the shaping of the child is also the idea of the evolution of the British language. So you imagine, I mean, the level of sophistication. And it is so funny. And I probably lose a lot because, and I mean, I think everybody loses a lot because nobody knows the history of British language as well as Joyce. But it is fantastic. And that's really what interested Hamilton. It is very, very important. You will understand better tomorrow when we'll come back to Hamilton to show you that he's not a pop artist. That's very important for you. You are, not all of you are British, not at all, but you are living in Great Britain. So I think it's important to understand that Hamilton is not a pop artist. Alors, and you will see, it's clear. It's not just my idea, it's what he said himself. He denied totally the idea of being a pop artist. He refused to be considered as a pop artist. But you can understand, reading this text, how can you be a pop artist if you want to work like that? Just impossible. It is impossible. There is no communication between being a pop artist and this model. Yes, there is one communication. It is pop content and not pop style. That's the point. Hamilton is interested in the pop content, a certain pop culture, but not in the idea of producing a pop style. Because the idea of pop style makes no meaning for somebody who wants to have several styles. Why would he choose one style, which would be the pop style? It's crazy, it's stupid. But pop culture, yes, that's interesting. It's interesting for Hamilton exactly the way it was interesting for James Joyce. Because when you read Ulysses, it's full of pop culture. Pop culture, even pop style, but as part of pop culture. Alors, and now I give you a perfect example of, I give you one image which shows you at once what Hamilton found in Joyce, the way Joyce, it will show you at once the way Hamilton illustrated the use of popular culture by Joyce. Nobody's laughing? Ah, yes, because you didn't read the novel. Because if you had read the novel, you would burst in laughing. Because these two women are in the hotel. They are at the bar. They are bar maid in a hotel restaurant where at a certain point in the novel Bloom goes to have lunch. And you see what they have in their hands, what they handle, and they are described in such a... Hein? Voilà, Miss Douce and Miss Kennedy. And they are... there's a brune, a blonde, and so on. They are behind the bar. You can, in a way, think of Manet and so on. Bref, you have layers and layers. And that's the way Hamilton represents them. You see, it's pop? No, it's great illustration. In the best tradition of British illustration. And it's funny, it's a stylization, this really opened the way for Hamilton's so-called pop art. But you see, it comes from Joyce and from this interpretation of popular life, popular characters in Joyce's novel. This very sophisticated interpretation of popular culture. In a way which, you can relate to the tradition of the painting of modern life. The painting of modern life, we shall see later on, it is, as you know, the program for painting produced by Baudelaire in his text, Le peintre de la vie moderne. And you will see that Hamilton, in a discussion, do we enter it now? No. Tomorrow. Hamilton, in a discussion, you will see tomorrow, is absolutely explicit. Is answered about pop art. And he says, no. What is interesting for me is the painting of modern life. So, now, Baudelaire. J'avouerai avec tout le monde que l'école moderne des paysagistes est singulièrement forte et habile. Mais dans ce triomphe et cette prédominance d'un genre inférieur, dans ce culte niais de la nature non épuré, non expliqué par l'imagination, je vois un signe évident d'abaissement général. Nous saisirons sans doute quelques différences d'habileté pratique entre tel et tel paysagiste, mais ces différences sont bien petites. Élèves de maîtres divers, ils peignent tous fort bien, et presque tous oublient qu'un site naturel n'a de valeur que le sentiment actuel que l'artiste sait y mettre. La plupart tombent dans le défaut que je signalais au commencement de cette étude. Ils prennent le dictionnaire de l'art pour l'art lui-même. Ils copient un mot du dictionnaire, croyant copier un poème. Or, un poème ne se copie jamais. Il veut être composé. You get the point? Ainsi, ils ouvrent une fenêtre, arbre, ciel et maison, ils ouvrent une fenêtre et tout l'espace compris dans le carré de la fenêtre, arbre, ciel et maison, prend pour eux la valeur d'un poème tout fait. Quelques-uns vont plus loin encore. À leurs yeux, une étude est un tableau. Monsieur Français nous montre un arbre antique, énorme, il est vrai, et il nous dit, voilà un paysage. Monsieur Rousseau m'a toujours ébloui, mais il m'a quelquefois fatigué. Et puis, il tombe dans le fameux défaut moderne qui naît d'un amour aveugle de la nature, de rien que la nature. Il prend une simple étude pour une composition. Un marécage miroitant, fourmillant d'herbes humides et marqueté de plaques lumineuses, un tronc d'arbre rugueux, une chaumière à la toiture fleurie, un petit bout de nature enfin, deviennent à ses yeux amoureux un tableau suffisant et parfait. Tout le charme qu'il sait mettre dans ce lambeau arraché à la planète, tiens, j'avais jamais remarqué le coup du lambeau là, pardon, ne suffit pas toujours pour faire oublier l'absence de construction. Voilà, everything is there. So you got the point, huh? What Baudelaire refuses is the confusion between study and tableau. Voilà. These artists, they are good, they know how to paint, they are good technicians, they have an ability, skill, but no imagination. They are unable to compose. They open the window and they paint what they see in the window. You see the difference between a study and a tableau. And you see also the proximity between composition and construction. Huh? So now the last quotation of Baudelaire, the most interesting maybe the one about le tableau comme un monde. This is a beautiful text. Un bon tableau, fidèle et égal au rêve qu'il a enfanté, doit être produit comme un monde, de même que la création, telle que nous la voyons, est le résultat de plusieurs créations dont les précédentes sont toujours complétées par la suivante. Ainsi, un tableau conduit harmoniquement consiste en une série de tableaux superposés, chaque nouvelle couche donnant au rêve plus de réalité et le faisant monter d'un degré vers la perfection. Tout au contraire, je me rappelle avoir vu dans les ateliers de Paul Delaroche et d'Horace Vernet de vastes tableaux, non pas ébauchés, mais commencés, c'est-à-dire absolument finis dans de certaines parties, pendant que certaines autres n'étaient encore indiquées que par un contour noir ou blanc. On pourrait comparer ce genre d'ouvrage à un travail purement manuel qui doit couvrir une certaine quantité d'espace en un temps déterminé ou à une longue route divisée en un grand nombre d'étapes. Quand une étape est faite, elle n'est plus à faire, et quand toute la route est parcourue, l'artiste est délivré de son tableau.